Week 2 of UCF football is upon us. But what are the keys to the game for the UCF Knights?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at UCFKnightzone.com to talk some UCF football here on a Thursday night. Andrew, North Carolina A&T is next. They are Scott Frost and Tayven Jackson's next victim. Now, I know we can't look past anybody. Our listeners are smart. They told us can't look past Jacksonville State, and boy, were they right about that one. Now, we expected Jacksonville State to mount somewhat of a defensive challenge to what UCF was going to try to do offensively, but once the Knights found their flow and their quarterback, it was lights out for them. Now, what are the keys to the game? And this one, we're going to talk about this on today's segment. Then we're going to talk about expectations on UCF starting quarterback Taven Jackson, the guy that you thought should and would win the job in the offseason. We're 2 weeks in, and he's the starter. And then we'll talk about committing to the run here on the back half. But let's start with the keys to the game here. Look, it's my first key to the game. We're doing 3 each here. It's got to be quarterback play. Taven Jackson has got to make UCF two-dimensional, and he's got to be able to complete passes at a rate that teams cannot just sell out versus the run and force you to throw. Now, I don't think North Carolina A&T is going to have the horses to stop UCF, but they say the biggest jump for any team comes between week 1 and week 2, and that means the biggest jump for any player, I think, has to be Taven Jackson.
Well, Taven Jackson is, he's been working with the ones all week long. Cam Fancher still out. Once they realize there's no chance of him going, then that's when they named Jackson to start. But he's been working with the ones all week long. So that helps build chemistry, timing. My first key of the game is limit unforced errors, penalties in particular. Drive killers. We saw UCF on multiple occasions have double-digit drives that yielded nothing, and penalties derailed those. And then they had chances of stopping drives, but penalties kept drives alive going the other way. So if they can limit the unforced errors, I think that'll make a huge difference. And that's it was in some ways it was very undisciplined. They didn't let their emotions get the best of them, but the focus wasn't there. And that's where those offside calls come into play. As I always say, move on ball, not on call. And there's no excuse, especially if you've had more than 4 offside calls in a single game. Okay, something's got to give here. If they can take that down a couple notches, that's my primary key. I think anything else can be worked on during the game, but penalties just destroy any momentum you can build.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. And as lame as it may sound, my second key to the game was going to be limiting penalties. You are not a good enough football team to shoot yourself in the foot and expect to beat even average football teams right now. UCF's got a long way to go. And Scott Frost and his staff are laying the foundation for what this football will be 2 to 3 years from now. Hopefully that's a competitive Big 12 program. And when I say competitive, I mean competing for the Big 12 crown by year 3. Now, that may sound quick, but in the era of the portal, you can do it a little faster. UCF may not have the dollars that other people have, but it's not going to be used as an excuse for why you don't have a competitive football team. Develop at a higher rate, identify talent at a better rate than your coaching peers in the Big 12, and figure out a way to creatively win football games. All that is harder when, you line up and false start, or you get a big sack, but he was offsides.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a little bit of both those things in game 1. Eliminate the dumb penalties, man. I can't stress that enough. So that was my number 2. I'm going to go to you next. So second key to the game here?
My second key is don't play down to the competition.
There you go.
This is, so the expectations of UCF from the talking heads out there is they're not a good team. And by playing down to Jacksonville State, they reinforced that view. You look at CBS, you look at The Athletic, and they rank I think it's up to 136 FBS schools, and UCF's in the mid 70s. And they actually went down from game one, from week 1 to week 2, because Jacksonville State is not a good team. Yes, they won a conference championship last year, but last time I checked, that 2015 UCF team, they were reigning conference champions. They won the conference the prior year. It doesn't matter. Both teams were absolutely gutted when coaches left. Rich Rodriguez left Jacksonville State. Obviously, we know the history of what happened after Gus Malzahn left UCF and the retooling and rebuilding that they've had to do. But no one's taking either of these teams seriously. And UCF they played down to the competition by making unforced errors that we've talked about with those penalties and whatnot, and some coaching mistakes in there too. You're playing against a North Carolina A&T team that hasn't had a winning season in a number of years.
Yeah.
We're already 0-1 this year. You cannot play down to your competition. This is their chance to kind of right the ship and start building positive momentum. Because while you may have a bye week, next week, you've got your last non-conference game against North Carolina a week later, and now you're talking, a power conference team, albeit, getting absolutely shellacked by TCU. That doesn't mean they're going to play the same way against UCF. So you gotta, play the way you're supposed to play. Don't, you gotta keep the pedal down, put the foot on the throat, and, pull ahead enough where then you can kind of lighten up, bring in your second unit and whatnot, but you cannot play down to this team. You just can't do it.
Yeah, UCF definitely can't afford to play with their food here. And I'll tell you this, that speaks to preparation. Can Scott Frost prepare his team every week like it's their Super Bowl? And if you can, then you beat bad teams the way that you should beat them. And if not, you give those teams hope. And I'm telling you, hope is a dangerous thing to give a team, right? Like,
I've watched SEC shorts. I've watched SEC shorts. Hope is a villain.
Hope is definitely a dangerous thing to give a team that has nothing to lose. And that's what North Carolina A&T has here. They can go out and play with a certain abandon, understanding nobody expects them to win. My last key to the game is just run the football. Demoralize them. That'll take that hope away. You run the football down their throats, and you control time of possession, and you limit offensive possessions for them. Limited opportunity to get into a flow offensively, but you start going 3 and out, and you start having short drives, and the more they get on the field, even bad teams can score on you if you give them enough chances. So run the football, get Myles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon going. Jaden Nixon didn't look great in game 1. Hopefully we see more from him. We heard so many glowing things about him and the offseason. I'm very pro player, but I want to understand this is not personal, but he didn't look great in game 1. It did not, what I saw in game 1 did not match the reports. So I want to see some play from him that matches the reports that we got for how he was performing in practice and in camp. And Myles Montgomery, it's clear it's there. It's there, right? Jacksonville State keyed in on him because early on, UCF, they're not good enough. They're not good enough to just smash with a lot of people and run when they expect you to run, and it worked. They got credit to them, Charles Kelly's squad. They got after him, but you got to you got to figure out how to establish the run. I think in this one. Because North Carolina's coming, and I know what happened to them, but look, it's going to be a competitive football game. I think it's maybe a little closer than a lot of people thought it was, and then you got Kansas State to open your Big 12 schedule. So figure out how to run the football before those games.
My third key is rotations. You just talked about the running backs. Scott Frost admitted he abandoned the rotation, and that was one reason why the running game got absolutely stifled in the second half. I mean, they averaged less than a yard in the fourth quarter per run. You've got to go through your rotations. You did your offensive line rotations. As we talked about the grades the other day, and right guard did really well, but a number of these guys struggled. Rotations, give them a chance to recoup and reset, and don't be afraid of moving guys around. Like you've got 2 left tackles. If for example, if Paul Rubel's tired, sub him out. Have him take a breather. Let the backup in, and that's why you have a 2 deep. And those guys, they do need breaks. Especially when you're running tempo or just smash mouth explosive run blocking football. There's nothing wrong with that. Rotate your running backs. Rotate your defensive linemen. I thought the defensive rotations were pretty spot on as far as how they did it, but they got to do it across the board. Follow your rotations. Be smart. Don't override any one player and run them into the ground, because it's a long season and you need them.
Absolutely. Look, all eyes are going to, great keys to the game there, Andrew. All eyes are going to be on quarterback, though, Taven Jackson. And he can give fans a lot of hope with a good performance this weekend, especially heading into what looks like a very mortal North Carolina team right now. We'll talk about the expectations on him right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Upside. Hey, UCF fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Well, stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out at any time straight to your bank account, your PayPal, or the gift card, or Amazon, or other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app using my limited promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time, 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Look, offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Look, this is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. Mazda redefining the game here. Because these moments do more than win, they push what's possible. They remind us to go that extra yard, shift into that extra gear, and keep moving the game forward. Think about a clutch time where your player came through. Well, I think about Taven Jackson throwing a touchdown to DJ Black. For even every moment, Taven Jackson kept it alive. Mazda defines what that effort looks like. Going for it no matter what, or even a post-game interview that had a positive outlook. What keeps fans moving forward? Well, I think that it's hope, as we mentioned in this segment, and that's what keeps fans moving forward. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning, and it's just like there's no more to every highlight. There's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Expectations on Taven Jackson. He has to be the guy. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm writing off Cam Fancher. Many of our listeners came to the comments to express their displeasure with Cam Fancher winning the starting job, and they said some things about him that ended up being true in game one. But this was a close quarterback race, and it was so close that Scott Frost was unwilling to commit to a guy for game one, in a sense that he told us we could see the other guys. And he said this competition could go into the first couple games. Now we see why. Now, Andrew, I don't want to toot our own horn too much. That's a lie. I do want to toot our own horn. We said on this show that it was kind of like, what's going on, coach? This is, you don't trust all three of these guys. You don't. And there's one that they like more than others. I think that coaches deserve grace, Andrew, when it comes to picking the right quarterback. Sometimes they show you in practice, and I'm a golfer, man. Sometimes I feel like Tiger Woods on the practice tee, and I get to the first tee, and there's like two people staring at me and shank, right? And it's easier when nobody's watching me, but when the lights are on, it's hard. It is really hard. If you're a golfer, that analogy hits, man. I'm telling you, I don't. Like
I'm a bad golfer, so yes, it does.
Yeah, I don't like when people stand and watch me on the tee box. I'm just like, don't watch me, just look away. Well, Cam Fancher looked like he was on the first tee, scared of who was watching him. Taven Jackson looked like he had been there before, and it took him one drive essentially to kind of get warmed up, and then he went back in there, and he was very, very. They looked poised. He made good decisions. He was accurate with the football for the most part. I thought some of the throws to the flat could have used more accuracy. Stop turning the receiver around on throws to the flat, man. It drives me nuts. Dude, put the ball on the body slightly in front and give him a chance to make a play upfield. Taven Jackson, this is your moment. This is your time to put a stranglehold on this job and not give it back, because they don't always pick. It doesn't matter what program you are. There are better coaches than Scott Frost have not made the right decision initially about who their quarterback is. I'll give you an example. I'm going to turn it over to you. 2021. I'm taking you back to 2021. Georgia, Stetson Bennett did not win the job. You know who won that job?
So I think it was JT Daniels, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. JT Daniels won the job. He became somewhat of a journeyman after that. I think he played for like
somewhat of a journeyman. Yeah.
Like there's 6 different programs. And
they hitchhiker.
That he was the best guy for the job. Now, Stetson, that first year wasn't gangbusters, but they won the championship, and they only went back to back because he raised his game so much. He went from a guy who they barely trusted to throw the ball 12 to 13 times in some of those games in that first championship run to a guy who made New York for the Heisman the very next year. And he was a walk-on. And he was a walk-on. I mean, this is one of the best coaches. And Kirby Smart committed to Stetson. He was very committed. He didn't waffle. He's our starter. So when he got a chance to play because of injury, he never gave the job back. He didn't even make it a question. JT Daniels got out of there. Stetson Bennett has 2 championships under his belt, and he's in the league right now, and he's a pretty good pro football player too. They don't always get this right on the first go. And if you're Scott Frost, I mean, you brought all these guys here. Let's be clear, right? Well, the 2 guys, the 1 and 2 you brought here. Jacurri, who was the incumbent, it was a distant third. Cam Fancher and Taven Jackson, it appears Taven might have been the better choice. We need a bigger sample size, certainly. But if you're Taven Jackson, if you go out and you throw for 350 yards and 4 TDs, and you get Jacurri in the game, Brown in the game by the third quarter, you slam the door on your competition. That's what he's got to do. That's what I want to see. I want to see him slam the door shut on this QB talk.
Yeah. So one of the things that Taven Jackson said is, after the game, and I've said this before, that he's lost quarterback battles before, and he's had to step in when these moments happen. And so this is nothing he's not, he's used to this. He's dealt with this before. I thought he did a great job stepping in. This is his Tom Brady, Drew Bledsoe moment where, guy comes in from an injury. The other guy was supposed to be the starter. Here's his chance to cement himself. You put out a great product. It's really hard for the coaching staff to take it away from you. So this is a chance to lock it up. And I talked to various people that I've worked with over the years who cover Tennessee. One's a Big Ten person. And they said one of the negatives on Taven Jackson was he was always afraid to take it downfield. He has the talent to do it, but was always afraid to. So the issue of him checking down early is an issue that he's had at his previous schools. So to see him calm down as the game goes on and start to throw it a little bit downfield, and then you have the big 33-yard touchdown to DJ Black at the end of the game. You need to see more of that. Show the confidence to be the man. You can't be timid. And obviously we're not in practice to see how things are going. But if that's one of the critiques that came from the other schools, obviously this is something he has to work on. And sometimes the light bulb goes, I'm going to give a personal anecdote on this one.
Okay.
My daughter struggled with reading in first grade. She's currently in second. First part of the year, they took a standardized test to kind of baseline where you are. She was in the 31st percentile. And she would get frustrated and stuff. And then one day the light bulb just went off and she started reading more and was understanding the words and wasn't getting frustrated. By the end of the year, the school year in first grade, on the last standardized test, she was in the 74th percentile. Then we go into second grade now. They just took their first test. She had the highest score in their class. So I mean, sometimes it's just a personal thing. McKenzie Milton struggled a lot as a freshman quarterback. The light bulb went off season with the right coaching and development, and he became a whole different quarterback his second year. UCF goes undefeated. Sometimes it's just that personal development. The right thing has to happen. At the end of the day, it's the person has to make that conscious decision of these negatives that are affecting my game or whatever in life. I'm going to get past them. And I figured out the way to do it. And the light bulb just goes off and then the results start to follow. So this is Taven Jackson's opportunity to show that, one, he's not Captain Checkdown.
There you go.
Two, those deep passes were not a fluke. They're the start of what the Scott Frost offense is meant to be. We saw Cam Fancher just overthrowing that first play of the game. That's what Scott Frost wants to bring to the table. You get a guy that can hit that consistently. Watch out.
I agree. Look, Taven Jackson, please, sir, close the door shut on this QB competition. I loved your analogies there. Look, man, if the light bulb comes, this is a moment where the light bulb comes on. UCF may have, gotten really lucky that he came here. I love what they're doing in recruiting with Dante Carr and Kane Archer. I can tell you there are a lot of fans out there that feel like, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep Kane Archer on the fold. I've spoken with
That's
that
the
young
hope.
man. Yeah, I think he's a UCF Knight. But there are those who are a little bit more skeptical about whether or not other bigger schools are going to come through with more money and woo him away. He feels like a Knight to me. So respectfully, those people, I hope they're wrong. But at the end of the day, you need time. He's going to need time to develop. And in these first 2 years, if Taven Jackson is your guy, for Scott Frost, it gives you a solid foundation, again, to build the future of this football program. And, maybe you can attract some better talent in the portal if he shows that he can go through his progressions and find receivers downfield. Also, for the guys who are developing this year and a chemistry with Taven Jackson, the pitch to get those guys to stay, you got to re-recruit your roster every single year. Gets a little bit easier. Now, when you're winning, things feel easier. So if Taven Jackson is your guy and you can squeeze out 6-7 wins if you're Scott Frost because nobody expected you to find a guy at quarterback, it's hard to predict what you can't see. And that's why so many people are saying, oh, this is a 4 or 5 win football team. Well, if Taven Jackson continues to develop, the prospects don't look so bleak. And I'm telling you, after week 1, that North Carolina game, I'll tell you, it looks a lot more winnable than it did before the season started. So I know if the line is at 6 wins, I think, hey, man, every single win you get is crucial in that mission to get to a bowl game, and I would love to see that for them.
Hey, Mike, you know it's bad when the Sickos committee has that game circled.
I know.
UCF North. I was like, oh boy, I know. Yeah, I love what the Sickos committee does, but it's the fact that they circled that game. It's like, yeah, we're them this year. We're that guy.
Oh, well, look, it can't all be about Taven Jackson. UCF has to commit to the run. We're going to talk about that next on Locked on UCF. This episode of Locked on UCF is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Just like when you can win every Saturday with DoorDash's streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For UCF, Taven Jackson delivered in a big way. And I know you guys remember those passes to Dylan Wade and DJ Black. When the pressure was on, Taven came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance definitely may seem like it was a fluke, but I promise you it was not. Taven is going to be on a streak here. And just like Taven delivered for UCF, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. That's November the 18th. Get it delivered with DoorDash. The DoorDash guy better not be showing up in the fourth quarter, interrupting my football game.
Leave it at the door.
Yeah, right. I see it at the door.
Just leave it at the door. I'll get it at a commercial break.
Look, UCF still has to commit to the run. Myles Montgomery looked good early, but lack of efficiency in the passing game allowed Jacksonville State to kind of hone in on the run. And being a balanced football team is what you have to be if you're UCF, because I was very disappointed in that offensive line. I don't think that they can mash up front if all you have is the run. I didn't see that in week one, and I think I can only assume it's going to get harder unless we see something from them we haven't seen yet. But as Big 12 play approaches, committing to the run, controlling the clock, I mentioned this in my keys to the game, has got to be important. So while it's important to get Taven Jackson going, you also got to get Myles Montgomery going.
So, we talked about rotations, and that plays a role in the running game. UCF's offensive line, once the second half, well, even in the first half, they struggled some, and it just got worse and worse. Rotations help with that because you guys tire out. You need that offensive line to have that explosiveness that wears you down. It's not like the pass blocking, which is more agility based. You need that strength and explosion. UCF is going to be facing those corn-fed Midwestern players, come Big 12 conference play. Those guys are big. They're going to be dealing with some beef on the defensive line. So they're going to have to figure this out. Part of that's technique. You got to get under those shoulder pads, drive them up, figure out a low center of gravity. And that's where players like a Paul Rubel can really struggle, is because, well, he's so tall. It hurts being able to, bring yourself down to that set, try to lower that center of gravity. There's only so far you can go before you actually start hurting your own balance. So on a run block side, they got to figure out a way to make that explosiveness, to allow a Myles Montgomery to work his magic, but you got to also rotate your running backs. You take advantage of Jaden Nixon and Stacey Gage in there. You need to be able to rotate your players so they don't get overworked. Myles Montgomery has a lot of heart. He has a lot of drive, but lactic acid builds up. You wear down, and you need a guy who can spell you. Even RJ Harvey last year needed. That's where Myles came in and did a great job. You need a guy to rotate in. And Scott Frost even admitted, we abandoned that. We need to do better. That's on the coaching side. They admitted it. There's still going to be, bugs in the system that need to be squashed. You beta test all you can internally, but until you start getting real world data, which they got this past week against Jacksonville State, now you really know, okay, these are the things that aren't working. These are the things we need to work on. This is the thing we can exploit. Now that they've got real world data, they can take it to the next level. And as we said, in prior shows, complacency is the enemy of progress. You can't sit back no matter what. You're always looking to improve, but you highlight the stuff that you're deficient on because you want to try to create as complete of a team as possible. There's no reason why this team can't compete in every game they play. They just have to, shore up the areas of opportunities and those weaknesses and be efficient. No unforced errors. You rotate and you do your job and you make sure that, what you saw in game one, wasn't a fluke. When it comes to, starting to push the ball downfield, that's the norm of being able to basically pick your spot and make it happen.
I couldn't agree more. Look, they can't afford to get complacent for sure. And nothing about game one should make any of them feel too overconfident headed into this matchup. You just can't afford to overlook anybody. And I think, again, it speaks to preparation. Can Scott Frost get this team to prepare like they're playing in the Big 12 championship every single week? Because, and not to your point, don't play down to the competition, right? Play up to your standard. That's what we hope we see in week 2 versus North Carolina A&T. Either way, we'll be here to talk about it. Andrew Gluchov, I want to thank you for joining me, senior writer at UCFKnightzone.com. Head on over there to check out his written work and mine. We're writing about the Knights every single day. I can't wait for you guys to get a hold of that. So, watch us here, read us there, and we'll be back at you guys next week. Again, thanks for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about all the teams in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.